Hi, I'm Marty Nemco, and this is an excerpt from my book, What's the Big Idea? 39 Reinventions for a Better America. This is the first of the 39. How We Think Reinvented. As individuals and as a country, we make many bad decisions because we haven't paid enough attention to cost benefit. Examples. I'm going to give you about 4 or 5 examples here. I think 4. First is anti-terrorism. Requiring all airline passengers to take off their shoes has a near zero chance of stopping a terrorist attack. Terrorists know that all shoes are screened, so of course they'll put a bomb, for example, in a body cavity, or they'll use an almost impossible to stop attack. For example, they might open a vial of communicable virovirus in the pre-screening lobby of the international terminal. They might open that vial in a parking lot shuttle, an airport parking lot shuttle, or in a sports arena. Or they might inject that communicable biovirus into fruit in a supermarket, or into a suburb's not very busy, or I should say not very secure water reservoir. Or they could detonate a suitcase nuke in a car trunk in a busy downtown. The shoe removal and redonning ritual, on top of other low payoff, time consuming airport screens, such as double inspecting your boarding pass and ensuring that your toothpaste weighs less than 3 ounces, wastes countless hours of passengers' time and a fortune of our tax dollars in airport security personnel. In addition, lengthening security screening decreases demand for air travel. A lot of studies show that. And that hurts the struggling airlines, and it hurts all employers that otherwise would have chosen an in-person meeting over a teleconference or a video conference. And more personally, it means that grandparents less often get to see grandkids, and that long-distance lovers less often get to see sweetie. Our policymakers need to make decisions more on cost benefit. Another example of our irrationality is investing. 77% of mutual fund buyers choose actively managed mutual funds, those where an individual stock picker picks the stocks, rather than an index fund, which is like the S&P 500, or exchange-traded funds, which are similar, even though decades of data are clear that index investors do better. Another example of our irrationality, faith in God. A Google search on the term surrender to God yields 940,000 results. Millions of people follow the Bible's urging to be passive, to wait for God to provide. Here are some examples. Philippians 4:19. Be not wise in your own eyes. God shall supply all you need. Proverbs 3:1. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding. 1 Corinthians 10:17. God is faithful and he will not let you be tempted beyond your ability. Matthew 17:20. If you have faith like a grain of mustard seed, you will say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move, and nothing will be impossible for you. What are the odds that there is an omniscient, omnipotent deity who is watching the world's 7 billion people's every move to ensure they all do okay? Forget about whether such advice will result in your landing a good job in this tough economy. Remember that billions of people, including newborns, have died screaming in agony. And what about all those catastrophic earthquakes and epidemics? And if, quote, God will provide, why do billions of the world's people lack basic food, basic water, basic shelter, basic health care? Could anyone who makes decisions based on cost benefit, quote, surrender to God? Next example, global warming. We are spending trillions of dollars to try to cool the planet. For that to be worth the costs and restrictions, for example, pressuring people from their cars into the more time-consuming mass transit, all of the following must be true. And these are estimated probabilities. Number 1, the planet is warming. Estimated probability 0.9. 2, The warming is substantially man-made. Probability 0.9. The warming's net effect must be so negative as to justify the cost. Probability 0.7. Here's a key one. The world's 200 nations must all substantially comply with the severe restrictions on carbon footprint for the 50 to 75 years until alternatives to fossil fuels advance enough. Probability 0.2. And 5, the money and human resources devoted to trying to cool the planet are better spent than what otherwise could have been spent to advance humankind. For example, immunizing people. Of course, my probability estimates are just guesses. There are simply too many unknowns for anyone to make solid estimates, and I've spoken to top physicists about this. But I slanted my guesses toward the environmentalist consensus position rather than the more skeptical positions held by a minority of scientists, but some very credible ones. The joint probability of those 5 events that I just mentioned occurring is likely under 10%, and in other words, the chances are 9 in 10 that the massive effort to cool the globe won't work well enough to justify the costs, including the opportunity costs. Isn't the analysis I just made at least worthy of being included in a policy discussion on whether it's wise to reallocate resources now spent on the least cost beneficial elements of global cooling policy? Unfortunately, the public and many leaders are swayed by the too broad brush, non-analytic, well, what if we're wrong, cataclysm, especially on issues as important and costly as global warming. The probabilities, the cost benefit, deserve to be considered by the public as well as by its leaders. And the final example that I'd like to give of irrationality that we make is our attempts to close the achievement gap. We continue to bet on education as the tool most likely to close the achievement gap. That, despite more than a half-century and trillions of dollars spent trying so many permutations and combinations of teaching style, curriculum, etc., and yet the achievement gap remains as wide as ever. We have not been able to do better than to tout a non-replicable superstar teacher or a pilot program, from Marva Collins, whose school, by the way, is now closed due to lack of enrollment, to Michelle Rhee's DC non-miracle, to Bad Data Kip, to the latest fad Khan Academy. By the way, everything I'm saying here, there are citations in the text version of this that is below. Go take a Khan Academy lesson and ask yourself if a year of that is likely to close the algebra achievement gap. Those classes are really boring. Only highly motivated students will learn algebra that way. Do you really think America's low achievers will learn algebra so much better with Khan Academy lessons as to close the achievement gap? Yet we continue to prefer to bury our heads in the sand and bet a fortune and our children's future that the next classroom innovation du jour will close the achievement gap. Is it not time to start thinking cost-benefit? Could the enormous cost of those classroom programs and trainings and so on be more wisely spent? For example, mightn't it be wise to accept that we aren't close to figuring out how to close the achievement gap? And so rather than spending more trillions on unlikely to work classroom programs, shouldn't we reallocate those dollars to fundamental research aimed at figuring out the foundational bases for the achievement gap, and only then to develop programs based on those bases, and if there's money left, to return it to the taxpayer? Here is the larger solution. The most important thing, in my judgment, that schools and colleges should teach is how to think rationally. Cost, benefit, risk, reward, opportunity costs. Alas, we're too busy teaching the periodic table of the elements, the causes of the War of 1812, the intricacies of Shakespeare, and how to solve quadratic equations. I'm Marty Nemko. Thanks for watching and listening. The book, by the way, is What's the Big Idea? Reinventions for a Better America. It's available at Amazon.